Hello. So, first, thank you to the student who texted me about the fact that you all couldn't see your grades. I had no idea. Um, it appears that they updated the system. So, if I post a grade and write a comment, if I don't hit submit for the comment, you can't see the grade. And normally, if I just click the arrow in the past, it would just automatically like send everything out. Um, so, I'm really sorry that several of you, probably all of you, were stressing over the fact that you weren't getting your grades. So kudos to the one who reached out. If you ever are worried about something and I am your instructor, please know. I want to know. That's why I give you my cell number. Yeah, you can email, but it is slow, and I don't always get them appropriately. Um, don't ask why. I still haven't figured it out all the way. But anyway, yeah, just say, hey, I'm just wondering about this, okay? Because in this case, I had no idea that you couldn't see the grades. So I've gone in and I figured out I had to hit the submit button for my comments so that it actually posted everything. So that should be up. So everything that has been submitted as an assignment, all of the grades should be visible as well as my feedback. Um, okay. And as I said before, if there's anything that I deducted points for, I tell you exactly what that is. And if you want to change it, you can correct it for a grade change. Nobody received anything less than an A. You all did a fantastic job. And this is difficult content. So I'm really grateful to the effort that you all are putting in the course. Okay, so that's out of the way. I want to provide some overall feedback on the ideas from the first CTE to just reinforce it so that it kind of stays with you as we move forward. So you remember the first CTE was focused on if you're born into a family that has a history of drug abuse and violence, does that essentially predict that's going to be your future? And because we heavily emphasized epigenetics, which everybody talked about, no, it does not. Okay, so epigenetics does not change our genes. Okay, but our genes are constantly responding to our environment by modifying how they function. And that can be anything from being turned completely on to being somewhat silenced or being turned off completely, right? And that by modifying how these genes are functioning, it then modifies every other aspect of human development and behavior, okay? Because everything that we are in terms of physiological structure, including our nervous system and how it functions, is literally being regulated by the instructions that come from genes, okay? So, for example, if you have a gene that's telling your brain, build new neurons and build neural pathways, and it's like amped up and on all the way, then your brain's going to be very plastic, okay? And that's what we see early on for the first 25 to 30 years of life, sex dependent, right? Remember, it's 25 years for females and 30 years for males. And I'm using those terms specifically because it's not about gender identity. It's really about sort of sex specific binary aspects. But even then, there's variation in there. But to keep it simple, we're going to keep them in two camps. Okay. All right. So the child is not predestined. And just about all of you talked about the need for appropriate parenting, low stress environments, positive reinforcement, things like that. All of these things prompt healthy neural development in early life. And anything that's going to promote healthy development early in life is absolutely going to counteract any potential genetic predisposition. Okay? So that was the main idea for the first one. And everyone pretty much nailed it home. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But that was the main ideas for this particular CTE. All right, CTE2, the one about the brain development. So this is the one where the 17-year-old has a car accident and damage is done to the prefrontal cortex, right up here. And everybody did an excellent job of saying the prefrontal cortex is responsible for executive functioning, personality. These are potential changes that you would see in behavior. These are potential like resources that you could use to shore it up, understand your concern. Some of you, not all of you, some of you added that final main idea that was critical. And that's the idea that our client is only 17 years old. Remember, prefrontal cortex is still developing up to 25 to 30 years. And for our 17-year-old young male, he's got almost 13 years left of his brain regularly building new neurons and making neural pathways. And by doing that, there's a good chance that the area that was damaged in the brain might actually be repaired. Okay. And there are, in addition to this, and I didn't add it in any of your feedback, but there, in addition to this, if it was my client, as a clinician, I would then prompt them to say, here are specific interventions that would actually amp up or increase that natural plasticity, that neurogenesis in the brain that could potentially shorten the recovery time and increase the likelihood that your client would actually make a full recovery. Two in particular that do an excellent job of doing this according to research, and that you may be able to get a teenager to do, an adolescent, include physical exercise and mindfulness-based type activities like mindfulness meditations, breathing exercises, even grounding techniques can be considered mindfulness-based approaches, as long as they're done every single day. I would recommend twice a day, but it literally only takes like 10 minutes for each session twice a day. They could do it first thing when they get up, before they go to bed. And what that does is that takes, say, a 50% rate of growing neurons and amps it up to, say, like maybe 75. And we don't really know the difference there. I just want you to sort of conceptualize it that way, that if you're having trouble hearing a TV show, you turn up the volume, right? If your brain is having trouble rebuilding area that's been damaged, turn up the amount of construction that's occurring, right? And that's what those interventions can do. All right. So those are the main ideas for CTE2 and the neurodevelopment. All right, so main ideas again. Oh, wait, there was one more for the CTE2. I saw a couple times where individuals commented on cognitive behavioral therapies in relation to TBIs. Yes, and no. How is that even possible? Okay, so I want you to think about a TBI on a spectrum, okay? So depending on how much damage is done to the brain from the TBI dictates how much challenge they're going to have in executive functioning, okay? So here on the lower end, you're not going to see as many behavioral issues with emotional dysregulation. You might see some issues with, learning, because the prefrontal cortex is involved in regulating the difference or the transfer of short-term memory to long-term memory. Might also see some issues with, like planning, organization, stuff like that. CBT would absolutely potentially create change there, okay? However, if we talk about the moderate to severe end, where we can see significant changes in the regulation of emotions, especially for those that you're going to see more increased sort of aggression, anger, frustration, even potentially violence, and those are highly correlated with TBIs. CBT actually sets your client up for failure. So how does it do this? Because CBT is based on the founding theoretical principle that thoughts, think of this as a linear path, thoughts drive emotions, which drives behavior. And if we change the thought, we change the emotion, we change the behavior. Okay. The problem with this is when we have individuals that are moderate to severe for the TBI, thoughts are not driving the emotions. Their linear pathway has changed. It is emotions drive thoughts, which drive behavior. It is completely different. And trying to change the thought with the assumption that it will change the emotions sets the client up for failure. So let me give you an example. I see this a lot in children who have a history of trauma, where the prefrontal cortex has been damaged from excitotoxicity. So not a TBI, but from excitotoxicity. And so usually lower end to moderate change, not super severe. They'll go to therapy, and through cognitive behavioral interventions, they'll learn about all different types of ways to use their words, to express their feelings, to stop and take take some deep breaths and calm yourself down, count and so forth. Things they'll learn these skills, right? And say, this is what's going to help you control your emotions, with the idea that once they have this information, that this part of the brain is going to be able to exert enough authority over the amygdala to say, no, 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 you need to chill out because this is what we're going to do. But the linear pathway has literally changed. The prefrontal cortex no longer has that kind of authority and power over the amygdala. So it can make those suggestions all day long, and the individual won't be able to do it. And so what this does is it leads to then blaming the client and the client failing. You know the skills and what you're supposed to do when you feel yourself getting upset, and you're not doing these things to control the way that you feel and the way that you behave. So this is all on you, right? When the reality is that only works when the prefrontal cortex is appropriately asserting top-down processing, that it has that power and authority to tell the amygdala to chill out. And the minute that that top-down processing flips, the amygdala is the monarch, right? Or the king or the queen of the brain. And the prefrontal cortex can make those assertions all day long, but the amygdala is not going to listen to it because it's leading the pack now, right? Emotions are now driving the thoughts and driving the behavior. And another example where you can see this oftentimes is when individuals have severe anxiety issues, like the DSM will call it an anxiety disorder, right? Where they can consciously say, and even openly express, I know there's no reason for me to feel anxious and afraid right now, and I am safe. But they cannot change the way that they feel, nor the behavior that they are doing to try to regulate those emotions. Make sense? And so CBT, yes, but only on the lower spectrum. Once we start seeing that emotional dysregulation is kicking in, they need additional support to reduce stress in the environment so that they're not experiencing stress, which is counteractive to growing new neurons, remember, because it'll kill neurons and degrade neural pathways. Yeah, so that's the caveat. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, and then for the third one, there were a lot of different ways that you could go with this. All of you picked up on, for all three clients, that stress is an issue and that there's potential for that to influence fetal development, right? So remember fetal programming. Stressed moms means a stressed fetus, means a stressed baby. And now we can even track it up to 10 and 15 years later. It literally changes stress physiology for the next generation. Issues around nutrition, issues around prenatal vitamins and prenatal care, issues around comorbid issues like the one that has potentially type 2 diabetes, and how might that affect things. Yes, you all did a fantastic job of noting all of the main ideas there, right? Okay, so that was it. Those were the big ones. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I'm going to see you in the next class. And remember, if there's ever anything that you have questions about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, because there's a very good chance that if you're having issues with something, that I have no idea and that I need to fix something, right? Like I would love to believe that I do everything right all of the time. Yeah, but that's just not the case, right? I am just as fallible as everybody else. And if I make a mistake that's causing you stress, all I'm doing is making it more difficult for you to learn while you're working through the class. All right, so don't hesitate to reach out to me. All right, fantastic job, everybody. And again, if you need anything, reach out. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next class.